A massive industrial current dictates the global economy, shaping everything from grocery prices and energy grids to the policy decisions of sovereign governments. This entire system relies on the movement of crude oil. Modern life depends on this resource for fundamental survival. Beyond fueling the planes and ships that transport goods, oil is the base ingredient for the plastics in our homes, the electricity in our cities, and the fertilizers that grow our food. Because every nation requires a constant supply of oil to function, a harsh geopolitical reality emerges. Whoever controls the global oil trade possesses a direct lever on the rest of the world. To understand how the United States captured that lever, we have to look at the aftermath of World War II. While the infrastructure of Europe and Asia lay in ruins, the US emerged with its manufacturing base and domestic economy completely intact. This dominance allowed the Allied nations to gather at the 1944 Bretton Woods Conference and agree to a new financial structure. They placed the US dollar at the center of the global economy. This diagram shows the logic of that era. Other countries tied their exchange rates to the US dollar, and the US promised that its dollars could be strictly pegged to physical gold. This arrangement made the dollar the world's reserve currency, but it also created a hard ceiling. American financial power was strictly limited by the actual tonnage of physical gold the US held in its vaults. That ceiling was removed in 1971. In a move known as the Nixon Shock, the president decoupled the US dollar from the gold standard. This shifted the world toward fiat currency, money that isn't backed by a physical commodity. Instead, a fiat dollar gets its value entirely from the public trust and the perceived stability of the US government. But that trust was immediately tested by the 1973 OPEC oil crisis. Arab producers cut off the supply to the United States and its allies to gain political leverage during the Yom Kippur War. The domestic consequences were devastating. Global oil prices began to quadruple, leading to severe inflation and massive energy shortages that left citizens waiting in block-long lines just to fuel their cars. Bleeding from inflation and holding a currency no longer anchored to gold, the United States desperately needed a new, reliable way to tie the dollar to a tangible, universally demanded asset. The solution was a highly specific deal struck between the United States and Saudi Arabia to stabilize the crisis. The terms were direct. The U.S. would provide Saudi Arabia with military protection and support. In exchange, Saudi Arabia agreed to sell its massive oil reserves exclusively in US dollars. Because Saudi Arabia was the world's largest producer, the rest of the global oil market was rapidly forced to adopt the same standard. This single agreement birthed the petrodollar system. With this, the US had successfully replaced the dollar's lost gold backing with the world's most critical energy resource. This diagram reveals the three-step dilemma for nations like Japan. Japan needs oil to power its economy, but it does not produce its own fuel. Because oil is only sold in dollars, Japan cannot buy fuel with its own currency. It is mathematically forced to first acquire US dollars through trade or by holding American assets. Only after securing those dollars can Japan purchase the oil it needs to survive. By mandating dollar-only oil sales, the United States manufactured a permanent, inescapable global demand for its own money. This creates a logistical question. What do major oil producers do with the massive influx of physical US dollars they receive every day? This is the process of petrodollar recycling. Oil nations do not hoard this cash. They reinvest it back into American corporate assets, real estate, and government bonds. This cycle provides the US with immense advantages. It keeps the dollar strong against other currencies, while artificially lowering the government's borrowing costs, because there is a guaranteed international buyer for American debt. It is a self-sustaining machine, where the rest of the world is economically forced to fund American growth just to keep their own lights on. Because these international transactions ultimately route through American banks, the US government gains oversight over the very plumbing of global trade. This oversight allows for the deployment of financial sanctions. By freezing access to these dollar-based systems, the US can isolate a target nation from the global economy. The petrodollar has evolved into a strategic instrument of statecraft. By controlling the financial rails of the global energy trade, the United States can sever a rival's connection to the world market without ever deploying a single soldier. This raises a central question. Given this level of American leverage, why do nations actively hostile to the US continue to trade oil in dollars? The answer involves switching costs. Moving the global oil trade away from the dollar is like trying to move an entire user base from an established social media giant to a brand new platform. Abandoning the dollar instantly breaks deeply embedded insurance structures, pricing models, and international legal protections. The dollar's ultimate defense is its liquidity, the ability to move billions instantly without crashing the market. Quitting the system means risking an immediate economic crash at home. However, a coordinated shift is beginning. The BRICS trade alliance is pursuing a long-term strategy to reduce global dependence on the U.S. system. Russia and China are already selectively settling oil transactions in yuan and rubles, specifically using these alternative currencies to bypass U.S. sanctions. Yet these rivals still utilize the U.S. dollar when it is purely convenient or necessary for their own stability. While these tactical moves represent the first structural cracks in the system, the petrodollar machine remains the dominant infrastructure running the modern world.